Hi, it's Nick Sadler of The Label Machine here, and on today's podcast we have Andrew Batey, the co-CEO and co-founder of Beatdapp, which helps artists and labels find fraudulent music streams. Now, that might sound kind of boring, but this was one of the most eye-opening episodes we have ever done. As an experiment, Andrew created an NFT artist, Urban Outlaws, and released a track, Drink and Drinks, to see if they could game the streaming system, and they ended up reaching number 3 on the US country charts. He learned a lot of this experience, and he shares with us what he did, what they did to get on loads of Spotify playlists, and shares with us what are the best ways to monetize your music today. You'll definitely enjoy this one. You're listening to the Label Machine series, a podcast to inspire and help indie record labels and artists to build income streams for their music. I'm Nick Sadler, a music entrepreneur that has helped start and run multiple indie record labels. In this series, I'll be speaking with music industry leaders about their experience and the lessons they learned on how they both market and grow their music income. Welcome to the Label Machine series, where we discuss with our guests how artists and record labels monetize music. Today's guest is Andrew Batey. He is the current CEO and co-founder of Beatdapp, a platform that music labels and artists use to track their songs and collecting royalties by providing real-time audit reports of streaming play counts. Andrew has a huge amount of experience running and raising capital for creative and high-tech startups, having raised over 50 million for his own startups and filed for over 40 patents across 7 countries. He's been featured across all the top entrepreneurial publications, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Forbes. At the helm of Beatdapp, he has guided the company to win numerous awards, such as winner of the Exploring Blockchain Breakthroughs competition and getting to number 2 as a seed stage company in Canada by Crunchbase. To top it off, Andrew is also a professor at the Trinity Western University, teaching advertising, marketing, and entrepreneurship to startups and future thought leaders. Absolute honor to have you here today. Andrew, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. One quick correction.
Yes.
I am the co-CEO. My best friend Morgan and co-founder, we actually share the responsibilities together. So it's kind of a unique setup. I think not a lot of people have it. But when you've been best friends as long as us, it kind of works out. So kind of a
Co-CEO and
co-CEO.
co-founder.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
exactly. Just for everyone out there wondering, like what it's like, happy to go in more detail there. But it's um we sort of help each other a lot because I'm the guy that runs off the cliff and he's often the guy making sure that we have parachutes. So
I know what you mean. It's funny with the titles as well, like that, as well as when you're a smaller company, and so First Flight, small company, there's 4 of us, right? Oh, no, 5 of us, and technically I'm the CEO, but I never really say CEO because I'm like, am I like CEO for me is like, you've got 30 employees, you're quite big, there's people underneath you, there's people underneath them. So I understand the thing, but it is, and my business partner as well, Phil, I think like you, like we balance each other really well. We're both really the CEOs. Like we both call shots together. Like a CEO would normally say, I have the final say. Whereas it's not really like that. I mean, yeah, how have you always just gone, yeah, I'm the CEO and that's it, even if this sort of company's 4 people, or, what's your take on that?
yeah, I agree with you. I've always thought CEO sounded weird. I also hate when people say they're like, and this is my own pet peeves, but I hate the word entrepreneur sometimes because I feel like people use it and they're not actually like building anything. They're more, they should rename themselves dreamer because they haven't actually tangibly done anything yet. It's just like they like entrepreneur sometimes is another word for unemployed. Um,
I
you know,
agree. But the funny thing is, if you go to a party and you're meeting somebody and you've got multiple companies and you enjoy starting up, you enjoyed starting up companies, selling them, then you are an entrepreneur, right? By definition.
yeah, for
And
sure.
a really easy word, if someone's say, I'm a doctor, I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm like you, I cannot say it. I just feels too cringe, too
Awkward.
cheesy,
Yeah.
too
But
awkward.
you're right though. It's like people will say, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
I mean, technically there's these 5 things that I've done mostly, but I've started 20 companies."
Yeah.
So it's like pretty difficult. to, where do you draw the line? Like, is this just a company with one project or agenda that you made money on? Or like, does it not count as a company unless you have 20 or 30 employees? And
Yep.
like, where's the line with that? Because there's lots of stuff that I start that I just think is fun. Like recently, this is music related. A couple of us got together and we decided to release a song to see if we could hack the charts. Like, could we become like a charting artist? And we did that in April. And my big focus on that, I know we haven't gone into exactly what Beatdapp does yet, but at some point I feel like we lost focus on the artist itself. We're like an enterprise company. And so I was like, it'd be really cool to go through the journey of the artist and just make a
Mm.
song, figure out how hard it is, figure out on our own how hard it is to promote, just go through the hero's journey that artists have to go through so that we have more empathy for them. And then look at our product and say, where on that journey could we help them? And so that was the initial kind of seed of this whole idea. And then it was crazy. Like we got a
So
band
tell us
together.
so tell us what was the song? Like, let's start there. What kind of genre was it?
We decided to start with country because I figured there's a lot of publishers already in country. It's easier to get going. You don't have to. I was trying to figure out how do you eliminate having to write the song, because obviously I'm not that talented. So like, is there a way to take a song first? I love country. Country is like a genre I really, really, really like. We work with a lot of country people. So I thought to myself, like, that might be the easiest one to go in. Um, at least there's pre-done songs already. There's a whole,
Mm.
industry of publishers and writers and people that you can listen to a near complete song and get an idea of what your vibe should be or what direction you want to go.
Mm.
Versus if you rap, like when we were looking at rap songs, for example, because my concept was, I'm all over the place right now, but the concept originally was, let's do 5 songs, 5 different genres, and I want to call the album Undefined because I don't think a fan is truly one genre. I think fans love everything. And I think if you have a vibe for the entire album, people
Mm.
will probably listen. So my vibe was going to be wake surfing with your friends. I wanted an album you could play end to end, no matter the genre, that was just fun to listen to as you're wake surfing with your friends. And like that was the vibe I wanted to go for. And so we started with country because it felt like the easiest one to get out the door and start building momentum with and see if
Yep.
we could just get this done because I didn't really know what I was getting into. So the song's called Drinkin' Drinks. The album was called the sort of group name is Urban Outlaws. I used
Nice.
NFTs for everybody so that no one had to use their actual brand. Like any artist that helped us didn't necessarily feel like we were stealing their brand equity to do so. So we had a lot of really famous artists help us with the song. And the benefit was that they didn't have to go out there and promote it. I just wanted to make sure we didn't have a crappy song. So I went to them. I was like, look, I need your help, but your name doesn't need to be on it. And all the money goes back to charity. So we actually wrote a pretty big check to Music Cares, which goes back to artists. And we didn't take any money from it at all. But the long and short of this whole rant is that it's really hard to be an artist, which was super confirming. Uh, and we were lucky. Like we did some cool stuff that helped us break through some of the noise. We went number 4. We went number 4 country music single in the United States the week of April 22nd,
Wow. So hang
and
on, that's the national charts
the
for,
national charts for the United States.
and so was that on release day essentially? You went to number 4. Was everything targeted
That
on it?
whole week. Yeah, so I think the big focus we had was how do we break the noise for the week? I think where I messed up was I didn't have a plan for after week 1. I sort of assumed I hadn't really tried to promote an artist, so I cut my teeth back in the day breaking artists, and that's what I used to do a lot of, and I was really well known for sort of growth hacking platforms early. So I was one of the first people building on Facebook back in 2006, 7 when it was still EDU based, and you had to have an EDU address in order to like do anything. And then I started building audiences on Facebook and helping launch artists. And it seems intuitive and normal today, but back then nobody was building audiences on Facebook. So like being able to leverage this very viral platform that no one was really using except college students to launch an artist was very novel at the time. And so when we did it, we actually found this artist at a bonfire from Nantucket, and we were like, "Hey, what if we made him a college rapper, like a frat rapper?" And we launched him, and he went number 7 Billboard, and just like blew up. And
Wow.
that was really interesting. And we did a couple other things early with Twitter and early with YouTube. And so I was kind of that guy that was really well known for breaking artists. And but it'd been, I stopped doing that company. We sold it in 2011. So it'd been over 10 years. And now in the day of TikTok, plus there's things have changed. Back then, you used to really try to hack visibility. Like you're trying to like break into someone's attention. And then once you got their attention, they decided whether like if you think about YouTube, you can hack the front page of YouTube. And at the time, everyone would go to the front page of YouTube. That's where everyone went to start their journey. There wasn't like an app yet and stuff. And what's interesting is that if people didn't like you, which happened to us quite a bit, like we would go to launch an artist and it didn't work, uh, you'd know, because if they start playing the music video and they dislike the music video, they're not staying for 3 minutes, like they're out. And so it's pretty interesting. Like you can hack the platform to get the exposure, but if your product didn't like actually meet the consumer or the customer, if there was no product market fit there, like it was obvious and that was it. I think in today's world, it's more interesting. The habits have shifted and there's so much passive listening. So people are just listening to playlists, and if they don't like that song, they kind of just more than not let it ride through.
Mm.
Like and so
As
how
long
do
as
you
it's
know
not
if that
absolute
person,
rubbish.
yeah, as long as you're not screaming in their ear, they're like, I don't really like this one, but it's too much effort to reach my phone and hit next. So like,
Mm.
I'll just let this, it's like 2 minutes, whatever. It's not
Mm.
that bad. It's kind of, I do it all the time. I'm like, it's not that bad. And sometimes I feel bad. I'm like, maybe they deserve an extra play. I'll just keep letting it go. And, and so it's interesting to me because that's not really fan building. Like in the other context, the way that I did this in the past, you would launch, then they would have to decide if they liked you or not. In today's sort of TikTok and playlisting era, just because you got exposure does not mean they're paying attention, that you have a captive listening audience, or that they even have decided they like you or not. And that's really hard to translate. And so I think that's the miss I had. I thought if we break into all these playlists and if we could get, charted, we would get noticed. And I assumed that if there's a spark, maybe a fire will catch. And I think what I didn't have an appreciation for at the time was how much additional stuff you really need to do in weeks 2 through 10. And really, following that up with more just sort of blocking and tackling that's required. And so anyway, we did really well the first week. We had everything geared for the first week, and then you kind of saw us peter out, and then
So just on that
surprising.
point though, because I think I think listeners would be really interested in, you're saying like, tackling and blocking for those weeks, 1 to 10, like, in your analysis afterwards, what would have you done? Like what 3 things would have you said, this is what we should have done to keep that going and try and then get to that number 1 point?
Yeah, I would say that the first thing we did is we had like no emphasis on capturing or re-engaging with our fans. We just tried to push everything to the listen to start. That first, everything was about pushing as many downloads and listens as possible for the first week. Um, and there wasn't really like a follow-up plan. So like how are we going to engage them? Should we think about any kind of tour dates? Um, should we try like what are the things that we can do after they've decided they're going to listen to us to sort of engage with them? We just did none of that. It was really just like get them to the song, get them to listen, get on playlists was like the biggest thing. Like how do we get on playlists? How do we get people's attention? I think we could have done way more. And also beforehand, there's a bunch of stuff we didn't do. Like I chose not to focus on TikTok at all. I felt like um I felt like getting all the influencers on TikTok was going to be really difficult. And had I had more time to plan and a bigger team, maybe I would have done that. But
Mm.
I I talked to a couple TikTok influencers and immediately realized this is going to be hard because like then their managers were involved,
Yeah.
agents, and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be like a whole thing, and I probably needed way more time for this and a creative strategy too around like what they're going to post, and so that became difficult. I tried this platform where they help you like do like a TikTok incentive, and it was like basically they have a contest for people to do TikToks, and it was like the worst thing. Our song's called Drinking Drinks, and it's about all the types of drinks you can drink and just how fun it is to drink with your friends. And
Mm.
like the group or segment that picked it up on TikTok were pregnant moms. And I was like, I think this is the wrong market. Like, this is like not the direction we were going. And we were like,
I mean,
300
they're the ones that
videos on
need a drink,
TikTok.
probably. They're the most stressed out, but they're definitely not the ones that should be drinking.
It was so crazy. I was like, oh man, this is not what I was going for here. And so,
So
it
you'd
was kind
created this you created this big storm
of
essentially, but then you didn't have, I guess you didn't have anything to catch all the rain that was falling down, and then and reuse that and recycle it and create something. Yeah, that's really interesting. Just to stay on this as well, because I know this is something that comes up a lot as well. I haven't even really got into your backstory yet. We're nearly halfway through. This is crazy. Okay, so I did want to ask though. You got to that number 4, and you really focused on getting on Spotify playlists. What are a couple of strategies that you did to get on playlists? If someone's listening and they're like, "Yeah, I need to get on playlists," like, what would you recommend doing today?
um I mean, like, the reality is it's really hard to get on playlists. Like,
Did you
it
use
feels
any
like
Did you use any
earned
apps or
media.
platforms? Say,
Yeah, the one that I thought was the best was actually Playlister Club. Um, Now I didn't get like massive playlists that drove hundreds of thousands of plays, but I got consistently, I think I got 70 or 80 playlists that probably drove, 10 or 20,000 plays so far. So I would say, and it's consistent. Like we still get plays. Like if I logged in right now, we probably still have plays coming from them. Um, and it's pretty cool. It's like real people who have real playlists, and like one of I think that there was one called like Country Road Trip that someone put us on, and we probably got like 8,000 plays from that playlist. So other people were clearly like listening to that playlist and listening to
mm,
us, and that was pretty cool. And I think I also know the CEO fairly decently well, and just from being in the music industry. And they have a real effort on kicking out fraudulent playlists. So they like really actually sort of diligence all the playlists that come onto their platform. So so how it works is you upload your music, it goes to all these editors. They basically rate it whether they like it or they don't like it, and then they get to choose if they're going to add it to their playlist or not. But it's like a discovery platform for them. And so you get feedback on if they like your song or they don't like it, and then you end up getting often playlisted. And so what I thought was really interesting about that is you at least know it's going to real editors and not bot farms, like not somebody
mm,
who's just running the numbers up on a playlist, and you're going to get in trouble. Because honestly, if you get blacklisted and you do the wrong things and you pay the wrong, a lot of people just go like, how do I get playlists? And they go pay some company $200 or
mm.
$300 to get on playlist. Like that's the fastest way to getting banned. Like, and if that happens, like it's going to be very difficult for you in your career to sort of,
Mm. You got to start again.
one, yeah, one tell Spotify, hey, that wasn't me, and then like explain why, get a hold of anybody there to talk to them about it, because it's sort
Mm,
of just like it's just done. Um, and so it's pretty difficult, I think, to come back from that. Even, and it's not just artists, it's labels too. Like I get labels all the time that say, hey, do you know anybody that can help us at this DSP?
mm,
One of our artists was unintentionally flagged for fraud. It's not fraud. We can tell you exactly what we did in this unique promo. And it's hard if you look at it from their end. There's a lot of fraudulent plays going on. So they're going, hey, this looks abnormal. Ours must have looked really abnormal. I mean, we had just crazy amounts. Like our focus on how we broke through was I went to a bunch of fan clubs that are not country related. I went to like the BTS fan club. I went to all these fandoms that are related to like Harry Styles and like Nicki Minaj and like all these other fandoms that we know and work with all the time. And I said, hey, I'm doing this song. This is going to sound crazy. Could you get your sort of audience to help us promote it? And all of them were like, look, this is awesome. You've been a huge champion of us for a long time. We're happy to support you. So what I did, what the unique superpower we had was we had access to fandoms. And what my hypothesis was that if I went to them with a clear ask, which is help us promote this song, that they would. And because of our relationship. And so
mm,
we were able to line up a little over 1 million fans across different fandoms to like really promote our song the day that it released. And so the day that it was leading up to the release and the day it did release, we used this app called Renaissance app, which is like a fan engagement app that focuses on this thing called like a streaming party. And what we did was we told all the fandoms, come to this app, set up streaming parties for drink and drinks, and tell all of your fans to come here and stream this song for us. And so that worked crazy well. I mean, that was honestly like 80% of our first week plays, just fans coming from everywhere. And so if you looked at at the time, it'd be like, oh, you pull up Drink a Drinks. It's like songs, artists related to this that other fans like. It'd be like Blackpink, BTS. And you're just like, some Latin, some like, like Latin artist. And it was nothing to do with country. And so I'm on the other end. If I'm Spotify or if I'm one of these DSPs, I'm looking at going like, this is clearly fraud. Like if I'm on their end, I'm probably thinking this is fraudulent.
Mm.
Now I had seen I saw this happening and I reached out preemptively and said, hey guys, this is what we did. This is not fraud. But just because I was actually worried we'd get our account banned, not because it was wrong, but only because it looked so like an outlier. And I think
Mm.
when things look strange, um, if you're just looking at the data, you have to make a decision. Like, do you think this is fraud or you don't think this is fraud? And that's kind of the dual-edged sword here is like, as an artist, you want to be able to break out, which means you have to do something different and unique to get noticed. But you also don't want to risk getting in trouble for that thing. And so there's this kind of like duality to it where it's hard to navigate that and say, okay, what can we do that like it makes us get noticed, but isn't a violation of terms and conditions and isn't like scamming somebody. So
Mm.
how do you do that? And it's kind of cool because you can be creative, but anyway, my point is if you're fraudulent or you engage in fraud, you will get caught. There's companies like Beatdapp is what we do, like
Mm.
catching fraudsters um, and anomalies. But I think that um, sometimes it's just hard to tell that story when it's in data. Like if there's
Mm.
some analyst or some safety and security team on the other end and saying, this is weird. All their streams are coming from,
Ecuador.
Sao Paulo, Brazil, Ecuador. Like that doesn't seem right. And in my case it was, and I could prove like, hey, look at the 40,000 retweets. Um, like
Mm.
you could see each pocket like of community and engaging and then so yeah, that it's just hard. I think if you're going to do something crazy, you should keep documentation so that way you have something to
Proof.
prove. Otherwise it's going to be a struggle for you. But yeah,
So,
that's not to get down on people with that. And then the other thing I did really heavily is I started we used NFTs for all of our photos because it was important for me that we went through the journey, but none of us got recognition. Like I wasn't trying to be a famous artist. I wanted to really understand what it's like to be an artist. And so from that perspective, everyone who hopped on the song, we gave NFTs to. We used NFTs as our art. And because of that, coincidentally, a lot of NFT communities bought our song, like purchased our song for download
mm.
because of the NFTs. And I think the miss I had was had I had more time, I would have spent less time doing TikTok exploration and done more time reaching out to NFT communities and trying to get the communities there to buy because one community bought like 3,000 downloads of our song. And so,
Wow.
like at Morgan Wallen that week had done like 5,000 downloads. So just one community was so responsible for a ton of our downloads. And that was pretty
And,
consistent.
and is a download as well worth more than a stream? Do you know how that works? Like if you're trying to get to number one, is like one download equivalent to like 500 streams, or how does that work?
I think it's 100 streams for every download. And then which 100 streams is a lot. Like that's like someone listening to your music all day long.
Mm.
And then the other thing is that, but that's only on a single. I think on an album, if you release an album and they had bought the album, it would be 1,500 streams. So the trick, well, the thing I didn't know at the time was I thought you could release a single and then get the 1,500. I didn't realize that it was only 100. That's a learning curve for me. I also didn't realize that you can't release an album with a single. Like you basically need to release the whole album or like it doesn't count. For example, like on Apple, the original plan was let's send people to Apple and download and purchase the track so that we can chart in Apple.
Mm.
Apple won't let you do that. Like you can't pre-sell anything until it's already live. Like the old trick used to be you load it on there, you send real fans there to pre-buy, you
Yep.
get all these pre-purchases, and the day of you chart because you've racked up,
Yep.
say, 2,000 purchases. You cannot pre-purchase a single anymore,
Oh, so if
especially
they
on your
stop
first
that, you
release.
can't. It doesn't all count towards your day of release. What do they
You
do? Do they
have to
just do they include or they
the
just
day
stack
it
that?
releases people can buy it. So you don't get the benefit of like working say 2 weeks to get the buys. to go live on that day.
Is it just
You
a
know what I'm saying?
pre-save now?
Yeah, it's just a pre-save, and then they have to go back. So they've added this level of friction, and that's to keep people from gaming the charts that way. The only caveat to that is if it's an album, but we didn't have a whole album to release. So part of my strategy I didn't realize wasn't going to work until like a week before, and that was like a mistake on my end for sure.
I would have made the same mistake because I've just learned today that you can't do that anymore. It was so standard for so long, but makes sense why they've done that, really, isn't it? Because yeah, people could just buy their way into the
Amen.
charts. So this was
Yeah.
April this year, is that right? You did
Yeah,
this.
April 22nd.
So did that? You're talking about relay making sure things weren't fraudulent. Had you started Beatdapp then, or did that come off the back of that?
Oh, we started Beatdapp in the very end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And the premise for Beatdapp, which is the company that I co-founded and co-CEO
Mm,
of, um, came from actually one of our labels. So my co-founder and I used to work in the music industry. He worked on the lobbying side. He
mm,
um he often jokes that he's a recovering lobbyist, but he helped extend copyright protection for artists in Canada from 50 to 70 years. So he worked on the file for Music Canada that helped extend copyright protection more on the government regulatory side.
mhm,
I was obviously an artist promotion breaking artist. We met in grad school,
mm,
um, and decided that at some point we wanted to build a company together. He moved to LA at the time. I was living in LA, and we started going to football games together like all the time with a bunch of other music guys. And one of those executives at a label said, "Hey guys, we have no idea how many times a song is played on streaming services. Like we get a report from a DSP that says, artist A did 100 million streams, but we don't actually know if that's 100 million. Everyone in blockchain and everyone in art, rights management is focused on who owns what percentage of the song or the royalties. No one's actually checking to see if the number is correct. Like, is the number of times that song was played actually real? In the old days, we would know because we'd have trucks distributing
mm.
CDs. We know how many pallets went out. We know how many CDs fit on a pallet. We know how much gets returned. We know how much breakage there is. In today's world of digital, we no longer have a view into like a real view into distribution. So the number they give us is like gospel. That's the number we then invoice off. So if your label and your artist does 100 million streams of 500 million total on the platform, let's call it Spotify, you get 20% of the advertising revenue and the subscription fees from that platform.
Hmm.
20% is what you did of the total streams. There's a pool of money. You get that pool of money, your percentage of that. Well, what happens if it was like 150 million streams and you should have gotten way more? And like in numbers, like, okay, it's an extra 50 million, but that's happening, every quarter for lots of artists. And if you're a major label, that actually amounted to billions of dollars potentially missing for the major labels, like globally,
So is that
misallocated.
because the numbers are not being because at the moment I'm saying, well, if they're over reporting, surely that's a good thing because you're making
They're
instead
always
of
underreported.
they're always underreported.
Yes, in almost every case, they've lost 10 to 15% of the plays,
Why?
like of the plays.
But why is that? Do you sort of get what I mean?
Yes.
Like I'm like if you've got a million plays and then you come along and go actually 20% of those are fraudulent, so it's actually only 800,000. From an artist point of view, you're like, well, that means I'm ending up with less money. So like, how's that? How is that?
Sorry, let me back up. The first problem that we were trying to solve was just transparency in the number of plays that actually occurred.
Gotcha.
So forget about fraud for to beginning. There's like this thing called an ETL script. It takes data and transforms it from like one database into a different language or into a different database. It moves data along. Um, because these platforms are global, they're using different servers in different regions. They're using different types of database structures. There is like effectively digital breakage that occurs as data gets transformed, or someone's phone dies, it loses all of the batch data. So if you were playing an offline playlist and your phone dies, like all those plays go away. They don't get re-uploaded typically. And so there's a big bunch of these plays that they never make it back to the parent database, let's say, that occurred.
Gotcha. Okay, now
But
I'm.
if you go to the server log like of the DSP, like if you go there and you pull all the logs of every time the song was sent out and you match that to the times they said it was played, there's this discrepancy. And almost every time it's like 10 to 15% under what should have been shown. So like if you're Snoop Dogg and it said 100 million plays, um, it's likely you probably had 110 or 115 million plays. And so then that changes what you would have invoiced for. Because if you're the label, you're doing 100 million to 500 million. So that's a percentage. The fraud piece was interesting because as we saw this discrepancy, that 10 to 15%, we went in there and said, this can't all be scripts being broken. So like why else are you holding back money if you're a DSP? And their answer to us, well, we suspect a couple of these things as fraud. So even though the song played, we think this is potentially a bot farm. We think these might be hijacked accounts where your account's actually stolen and someone else is playing it to play music to ramp up the number of plays on their songs.
Yeah.
There's a number of these reasons why fraud exists. And so we then started looking heavily into how do we help solve the fraud problem? Because in order to solve fraud, like in order to truly audit, which is what we built an auditing product, you actually need to also solve fraud. So we started building fraud detection tools, anomaly detection tools, and I guess more importantly, setting around standards for the DSPs. So like, this is what fraud is. This is our confidence score on why it's fraud. This is the definition of this type of fraud. And really trying to set like a standard language for all the DSPs as to why they're holding back potential, plays and sort of their justifications for it. So today we have this amazing blockchain product that can audit. That by audit I mean like you turn it live, and once it goes live moving forward, we can track every single play in real time. And we have 30 something patents in 7 countries for high throughput blockchain processing. We also have this fraud detection tool that helps DSPs fight fraud. And so with the DSPs, like we have a lot of household names that we're helping, and we literally go through. We have over 100, up to 100 models running, supervised and unsupervised models, trying to detect all the types of fraud. And it's like whack-a-mole. Like as soon as we discover one, it's always I'm always I guess not surprised, but almost like in a little bit of admiration with how creative these fraudsters are. We find the craziest stuff sometimes, and I'm like, man, that was really brilliant. Like I can't believe that they thought to do that. And so part of me is like, wow, that was brilliant. The other part is like excited that we're the ones catching it because it's a never ending process. And at the end of the day, these DSPs don't want to be the police of streaming. Like that's not their job. Their job is to deliver content to the most of us, the 99% of us, with frictionless experience and have like a really positive relationship with the music we're streaming. And so like our job is to find the fraudsters. And so we have all these models running, we find fraud, and it actually helps everyone. It helps the artist too, because a lot of times the fraud the fraud is like shifting market share, not just for the majors, but for all of the artists themselves. Like, like you get a percentage of payout as an artist, your percentage might be smaller, but you still get a percentage based on your plays. And if that is being artificially increased because you have a bot farm just running up, sleep sounds, like that does not help anybody that's actually an artist, because a lot of it's ambient noise or audiobooks or other types of things that they're just doing to financially defraud the system.
When you're talking about models, what exactly do you mean by you're running models? Are these like algorithms that like AI is running? Like how does that work? And following up from that as well, like what's an example of some fraudulent activity that you were kind of like most in admiration of when you saw it?
Yeah, so models, there's all kinds of like supervised and unsupervised models. Supervised means you train the model, you tell it what to look for, and unsupervised means you sort of let it loose with a bunch of data, and it tries to find abnormalities or anomalies on its own through like large amounts of data. And so a lot of what we do is supervised in that like the human eye can look at something and say, this looks like fraud. Like if I'm looking at data and it shows that one device or one account is connected to 400 devices in 18 countries in the same week, that's probably fraud.
Yeah.
If I look at another one and it says that there's 33,000 plays this week, that's also likely fraud. If we build another model, we'll look at similarities between users. So it'll look at how one user listens to music and consumes it and how closely related it looks to another user. And so if all of them are exactly the same, that obviously is fraud. Um, because how you consume music is also like a fingerprint. Everyone listens to music differently.
Not
So there's
everyone,
algorithmic
right?
models.
Yeah. Not everyone's gonna like hit play at exactly the same time on a song. 400 people, like that's beyond coincidence.
Yeah, and do that song after song after song. Like that's in different countries. Like that's not likely. And then the other one that I think is the more problematic one that is the hijacked accounts. So we're seeing a significant amount of hijacked accounts. And what that means is to give you an idea, because I've said this on podcasts before, so I'll just describe how I would build this, and
Yeah.
this is how they are building it. I can go on the dark web and buy 100,000 accounts. Most people will sign on to streaming services. A lot of people use single sign-on, so like Facebook, Google. When you sign in through the different application. And so what you can do is you can buy, let's say, 100,000 YouTube or sign-on account, and then go to different services and just see quickly which ones are connected to which services. And then when you have that mapped, so you've now filtered and you have like 50,000 on one platform, 30,000 on another, 20,000 on another. Then all you do is you use those platforms APIs to say, hey, call this call this account and find out the last 50 songs it played. And if you do that like every 2 hours, you end up being able to map how each individual account plays music over 2 weeks or something. And then all you have to do is cluster them by inactivity. So put all the accounts together that don't play music in specific hours. That's also just a simple filter. It's not very hard. So
Right.
now what I have is I know I have your login. I know when you don't listen to music, and I know what platform you're on. So then the last step then is just telling it, hey, when you're not playing music, when Nick's not playing music, um, turn on his account and go play these songs. And so what's really hard if you're the DSP is it just looks like Nick's listening to music. Like I don't
I
know that
stayed
that
up
two
late on
hours
Tuesday
wasn't
night.
Nick, or 12 to 2 midday because you're at a lunch. Like you never listened between 1 hour.
Mm.
And so what we see a lot of these days are just hijacked accounts, which are it's actually easier than what it used to be. That's an easier way to defraud a system because it used to be I would make 100,000 accounts and then I have to make a listening history for 100,000 accounts so that it's not obvious. I can't just only play Nick or all 100,000
Mm.
accounts become obvious. So if I want in the old days, if I wanted to drive a million plays to Nick, I had to drive 100 million plays to other artists and bury my activity amongst all this other stuff so that you don't know what needle is in my haystack. I'm trying to create a bunch of noise around me. But now you, Nick, you create my own noise. You create the noise for me. Like your regular listening is my noise. I just have to slide in to an area where you don't realize your account's been compromised. And then if your account does if you figure it out, I just go to the dark web and buy new accounts and I can buy them for pennies. And so it literally takes like very little time to steal accounts, set up the infrastructure to do this, and then play songs. And very few people will know their accounts are being hacked. So much so that someone at a service asked us, "Hey, I think my account might have been compromised. Can you look?" And we looked, and we're like, "Sure enough, your account's connected to like 16 devices in X number of countries or whatever it was, and you have been compromised." But like, they weren't sure until we checked.
They
Um,
weren't sure even. They didn't. That's amazing. Who are the people that are actually doing this? Like, where are they based? Are they gang? Is it gangs doing this? Is it just bored, like 17-year-old programmers? Like, what's your theory?
it is just theory because I think no one really knows who's behind the computer. I suspect that there's two types of fraud. I suspect there's like bot networks out there that are just trying to sell artist packages. Like you go to a website and it's like, oh, you help promote my song, get 100,000 streams guaranteed. Like that's likely going to a bot farm of some kind, and they all have unique infrastructure to evade getting caught. So this is just another way for them to evade getting caught to sell you on streams and make money off of artists who don't know better. I think that's one huge bucket. The other bucket is financially motivated fraud, and that's like all of the um, these shell corporations that are specifically trying to target DSPs who maybe they think they can get by. And there's a couple of ways they can do it. They can steal an artist song and slightly change it and then re-upload it, so that way it like gets past the sort of constant ID mechanisms. And then now all of a sudden, as they're driving plays to it, they're getting paid. There's people that will take like sleep sounds or things that are ambient noise, and like try to drive plays up to those so that they get a percentage of revenue from the
Mm,
royalty pro rata payouts. So I think the combination, there's people who are financially motivated to do the fraud because they can build a network, they can target the songs they want, and they can recoup cash on the other end. It's very direct. You play the song, you get money. You play the song, you get money. There's very few other than advertising where like there's a click or there's a view, you get money. So I think in a lot of ways, music has just become large enough that now people who would defraud e-commerce or defraud or you try to run fraud schemes on uh like
PayPal or
advertising or at
well,
PayPal or whatever have
mm,
just moved into music. And I think as we start kicking them out, we become an industry that's harder and harder, to scam, and they just move to a different one. Like these are just like professional. There's a huge bucket, I think, of professional scammers who see this as a gravy train and are just like pulling money out of the system and not giving anything back.
mm. I mean, you also, there are a lot more third world countries that are coming online. You've got an internet connection, you've got a computer, your brain screwed on, but you're destitute. How can I make some money? What can I do? And
Yeah.
this might also be a way of like, you know what, talking around like, the water pump or something. Hey, have you heard this way where you can earn some money and then you can get paid by crypto and download it? Like, I would imagine, if you're quite entrepreneurial, this would be a way to go and do it.
Yeah, there was actually a my co-founder Morgan would be able to recall. I'm horrible with names and stuff, but there was an article that came out about this kid in the Philippines, and he had to hit a certain amount of plays per day, and if he didn't, his fans would come off. And he's in this like hot sweatshop with all of these phones trying to get plays going, and if he didn't hit his targets, they turned his fans off on him as a punishment. And like this is like a very real thing that's happening in these emerging areas and markets.
Mm,
And there's ways to tell, like in that kind of instance, how we would tell is sometimes we get data from DSPs that's like phone battery, gyroscope. So if the phone's never been dead, that's a problem. Like if the battery never depletes, like that's also like indicative. Like who hasn't had their phone drop below 50%? Like that's like not normal. If the gyroscope on the phone never leaves, and so it's never been in a car or on a bike or anything walking, because you can tell the different, like that's how all these apps work. If you're
mm,
walking, driving, walking, because there's a gyroscope in your phone. If
mm.
that's not moving, then why are you never going anywhere? Like that's also indicative of fraud. Um, so there's like an absence of things that also is an
Very
indicator
cool.
that fraud exists.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. I didn't really think about those sides of it. So which labels and art? Well, I guess I know you're working with some, like you were saying, household names. But are you able to tell us about a particular artist or label you worked with that you showed them the real play count and they were like, whoa, you're sort of almost quite proud of working with and showing them that sort of side.
I think no one really wants to wear the scarlet letter right now. So most of our relationships are strongly NDA'd, and we actually can't public. It's like one of the hardest things not be able to publicly share really who we're working with. So um, I would say that for DSPs, it's the summary I hope that people realize here is there's a lot of fraud. Like officially, I think we're now saying 10%. It could be much larger in terms of all streams. Like it's a large number. But it's not the DSP's fault. Like they are doing everything they can to stop this fraud. There's
Mm,
like fraud teams internally. They're having companies like us work on all this sort of anomaly detection. Like we have spent years building these models. I think we're the best in the industry at finding fraud, and we help a lot of them find the fraud. But it's whack-a-mole. Like as soon as we close one pathway down, these guys find another pathway, and it's just about closing all the pathways that are the easiest. And at some point, they switch into a different industry, or the majority of them try to leave. So I think that it's not necessarily the DSP's fault, but they're happy we're there. It's the first time, like when we built the audit product, no one loved when you showed up and you're like, "Hey, I'm the friendly auditor from down the street just to make sure the numbers are correct." When you show up and you're like, "Hey, I'm the sheriff to find all your fraud," it's just a different conversation. The DSPs are way happier to engage with us and say, "Hey, we trust you." The other thing that was important that Morgan and I did and Poria, our other co-founder who runs all the tech, like none of this would be possible. He's like the genius behind all of this craziness in terms of the technology stack. And what was crazy at the beginning was we said, okay, we can't take any money from labels and we can't take any money from DSPs. We have to stay completely neutral and be like a neutral third party, no matter what. And that was really hard for us because initially all the money from people that were interested were from labels and from DSPs.
Mm,
And so trying to convince regular investors that there was a chance in music when there's this graveyard of companies that are all dead in
mm,
music. Like investors hate music tech investing. And so we had to convince people that we were the real deal and that they needed to invest in us so we could maintain our neutrality. And that was really, really hard to begin with. And I think now that we have it, it makes it way easier when we go to talk to the DSP and say, look, we aren't owned by anybody. We're here for authenticity, we're here for transparency, and we're here to help. Like we are the firefighters, and it is like all hands on deck right now.
mm.
And that's the reality. I mean, there's services out there that have publicly said that certain periods they've had up to 50% fraud on their platform. Like
Wow.
it is a big problem right now, and I think that it's just getting larger and larger and larger. And luckily, I think we're here to help a lot, and I think that
Mm,
everyone's receptive to it at this point. So
mm,
hopefully, my answer to you is that in another year, I'll be able to come tell you a list of all the companies we've helped. Um,
mm.
but I would say that
Okay.
I think it's becoming more of a norm. Like they're starting to show up on panels with us now.
Yeah.
Where it's becoming more. Uh, People are becoming more open about it, but definitely we've been kind of everyone's favorite secret friend for
Yeah.
like
For
a
a few
couple of
years.
years. Yeah.
So you talk about the the bigger household names and the bigger majors, and that they do have the deal with Spotify where they get a percentage, etc. What about like independent artists and labels, genre based labels? What's why is this important to them? They're not getting that kind of percentage share. Yeah, why is it important to them, and how can they engage? What's the best way of engaging with your platform? What's the best strategy for someone like that? And I'm talking about an independent, maybe 6 to 7 employees, maybe turning, around about 1 million a year.
Yeah. I would say as of right now, we aren't the best at helping them. Uh, we hope to have a product for them soon. It starts with the larger labels because they control so much of the like negotiating power with the DSPs and making sure the data flow is like there for us to analyze and or provide back. So I think that I think we will have a sort of product for the smaller labels within the next year. At least that's what we're working towards. And so we're a little early for them now, but it's because the problem isn't like the absolute dollar value for their problem doesn't materially change their
Mm,
like it might be $100,000 for which we can charge $10,000, but to support that, um, might cost us $20,000 or something. So until that we're at a place where we have sort of all the pipes laid and it's just an incremental like cost for us to turn on, it's hard for us to support these smaller labels. Um, but I think that we're getting to that point. I think in the next year or so we'll have all of that dialed up. So I would say if you're an independent label and you want to use a Beatdapp service, then just hold tight. We're coming soon for you. I think that there is value though. Like the value is like if you're an independent label and you can get auditing correct, you're probably instead of 1 million making 1.1 million. And if you can reduce the fraud and shift market share back, you probably are making 1.2 million. So that's like a 20% lift for you, which is material when you're making $1 million a year. Um, but in absolute dollars, it's still only 200,000, right? If you're a major label and you make $1 billion a year, that's $200 million. Just the number of just the
mm,
dollar numbers are so massive when it comes for the larger labels, which is why we're just trying to like fight one fire at a time as we sort of get out all the groundwork laid out.
gotcha.
Just because yeah, it's hard to explain, but every label has different data and building models for that isn't just like you turn it on. It's not one time. It's not out of the box. Like we get their data, we train like thousands of like we have to go tell it what to look for thousands of times per model, and that actually takes like a month of all of our team's time. And so to do that at scale for smaller labels is really difficult right now. once all of that has been laid and done, we've sort of, let's say, done most of that for all these big labels and all these big independents. The model learns from itself, and it becomes infinitely easier to then turn on a smaller label without the human cost of like a whole month
Mhm.
to train a model. And so that's my point, is that we're nearing that as our technology gets smarter and smarter, and that will unlock our ability to help all of these smaller labels, I think.
Mm. Would it maybe as well be where you work with the distributors, and then they have inside the distributor an option to say, do you want to switch on like, do you want to switch on Beatdapp, and we'll do this for you, like, and then you're sort of consolidating a big distributor that has like, a
Yeah.
thousand labels. Especially if
Do
it's a
it.
genre based as well, like Label Engine is, all electronic music say, like it might be an easier way of doing that, especially for your models.
No, I think it's a really valuable input. We also agree. I think the hard part is that some DSPs or some distributors that works really well for, because maybe they own the license for that. A lot of times they're just the pipe, and the owner of the data and the owner of the content is still the label. So it just depends on the setup with the distributor. But we are trying to build products for distributors as well. We also have this like universal, for distributors specifically, this idea of a universal list, where like what happens now is if you're an artist that gets kicked off a platform, or because you're fraud, let's say, you
Mm,
will just like change a couple metadata fields and then go to the different platforms. So you might go like TuneCore, DistroKid,
mm,
Symphonic, just sort of like work your way through. And
mm,
so what we're building is a universal list so that distributors can ping our database and say, is this artist fraudulent, before they upload the music. So we become like part of their QC flow. So we're starting to work with distributors now on that kind of stuff, and we're hoping to. Um, at the end of the day, we just want to help everyone catch fraud and make sure the numbers are right so artists get paid correctly. And like I said, when you asked about independent artists, it made me think of the whole reason I went back to doing Urban Outlaws, which was we started to help artists. We realized we needed to solve like the backbone of the industry's problems first, which are these major labels and DSPs and stuff. I wanted to do a song so I understood what it was like to go through that process so that I could say, okay, how do we make it easier for artists? Like what of our technology stack can we then unlock for these different artists and independent labels and stuff? And
mm.
so again, part of me doing the song was not about me doing the song, was about me understanding their journey. And I think that's what I hope. I hope that is the thing that leads us to being able to help all of these independent artists, because I think I I've learned just so much about like, how do you get stuff distributed? Where do you go to promote your song? Like already there's probably 10 new partners I can think of for Beatdapp that I wouldn't have thought of, in January.
Mm.
So it's just it's interesting to me. Like distributors is a good example, where I wouldn't have thought of that necessarily because they weren't our core customer at the time. So um, yeah, I'm excited because I think what we're building is going to be useful for the entire industry. And I really think it's going to change everyone's lives. And so I think if you work as hard as you work to make a song, you deserve to get paid. Like that's just the
Hmm.
reality of it. And right now it's being eroded little by little from all these different angles. And I'm just hoping we can sort of combat one or two of them.
Firefighter.
Exactly.
So, you have, through the journey as well of well, based all your industry experience, and as well as moving, as well as releasing the music as well. A big thing that we talk about here is, how do you monetize music? I'd love to ask you, there are so many platforms and tools that promise to help monetize, music for artists. What do you think are the biggest needle movers for an artist that they should be focusing on to essentially monetizing music to get to the point where they can hopefully, pay their bills, and do music full time.
I think I've come full circle on this. So I don't think there's a silver bullet. Uh, like, um,
No, you're right. I don't think there is a silver bullet, but there's spokes to it, right?
for
There's lots of.
sure. I guess what I mean is nobody wants to do the sort of old school way. I remember back in the day when I was launching artists, I would
Mm,
talk to alt rock guys and I would say, like, why do you send them on tour for 4 years? Like this seems like in all of our, pop genre, artists, for example, they'd go in the studio, they make an album, we gear up to promote the album, we release the album, we push sell through, help them sell tour dates. But it's very like, um, you know,
That's
12 to 16 months, it's out, like you're going and they make it or they don't make it. Why are you sending these alt rock groups on 4 years of tours? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. I didn't understand. And the response back from the kind of old school alt rock guys was like, look, fans, especially in like alternative rock, need to feel like they found something, like they've really discovered you. And part of that is the relationship they build with you on these tours. Like when you're doing a show and there's 100 people in the room and you stay after to meet the 100 people and befriend them, they're like, man, I knew Chad before Nickelback blew up. Like I fucking knew that they were going to be huge. I called it. Like love those guys. And that never goes away, even if they try to cross over and become big later. And so what I thought was really interesting to that approach is in a lot of ways, it's just hedging their bets. Like if you're a label, you're putting them on the road because you're building a true authentic fan base of all of these like real fans. And if you don't make it commercially, like let's say when you push to radio and you try to do a bigger push, you still have 32 markets to go sell tickets to once a year for a tour, and you can live still touring and make the money back. The label at least will make their money back from that initiative. So I think the same thing's true in artists today. Like if you think about it, all the distribution platforms are so passive right now. It's like maybe other than TikTok where they create music or create something for your song, but like playlisting, they're just listening and it's ephemeral. It's like it comes and it goes, and no one. I couldn't even tell you what songs I listened to. I knew I liked 2 or 3 songs yesterday. I have no idea what they were. Just they
Yeah.
just were playing.
Yeah.
And so that happens all the time to people, and I think that like it's all of the sort of like build the true 1,000 fans for yourself. Like if you can build
Yeah.
1,000 true fans, like that will pay your bills. And I think that's true. Like,
Mm.
can you go and do these shows? Can you rock out with 8 people on stage, with 8 people at your show when you're on stage, the same way you would if there's 40,000 people and make them feel like they had an experience, talk to all 8 after the show and make them your biggest fan and do that over and over and over and over again until you have 1,000 fans lined up. I think if you can build 1,000 true fans through blocking and tackling, which is just like going and creating the shows, meeting the fans, building rapport with them, shaking everyone's hand, taking photos, all the hard stuff that no one really loves to do. It's exhausting. You get sick 1,000 times because you've shook so many people's hands and everyone's coughing on you and hugging you. It's like actually like difficult. But I think if you do those things, that is how you build a lasting career. It's not how you quickly became popular for 1 second, and then hopefully took off. Like that can work too, but that's less likely. I think you keep building, you build the building block, you keep adding a layer, adding a layer, adding a layer, adding a layer. And over time, I think you build this really massive, true fan base. And so to me, when you ask about tools, I would be looking at tools that help me tour. I'd be looking at tools that help me manage my merch. I'd be looking at tools that do like the physical thing that I'm engaging with those fans. And I'm a digital person saying that. And I'm saying that because I really truly believe that is the way to building like true economic value as an artist. I know an artist, I won't name him because he'll be upset, but he was really famous for a couple years. And what's funny is like he's still selling out shows everywhere. Like everywhere he goes, it's small shows, maybe it's 500 or 1,000 seats, but he still makes a living today, 15 years later, because his fans love him so much. And that's incredible to me. He hasn't had a hit in years, but he can provide for his family. He can, he owns a house. He like pays for his kids. Like he's like a legitimately working artist, who maybe just did it the hard way, like brick by brick by brick. But I think at the end of this, when you say who's lasted 40 years and this guy's made money for 40 years touring, like he not yet, but in that time frame, I think you look back at that and say that was probably a better journey than somebody who went really hard, really fast and burned out quickly. Because it comes and goes. Even the artist we broke, like I told you about, that I think I told you went number 7 Billboard. He was gone within like 2 years. you know, like we sold the publishing and all that kind of stuff, but you know, he's irrelevant now. And
Mm,
so I doubt fans are buying his tickets. You know what I mean? Like that's just the reality. And so I think that's what I would, if I'm an artist trying to build a real career and real like economic value for myself, I'm thinking, how do I set up tours? How do I reach venue talent, talent buyers? How do I book my own shows easier because I'm doing it myself, likely as an independent? Um, how do I get my own, press write-ups to try and get exposure? How do I make cool merch that people actually want to wear, so that people talk about me? Like I'd be focused on that level of stuff. I
mm.
know that's probably this is my soapbox, but that's I honestly think that those are the things no one wants to do. Everyone wants to like release a song, get on a major playlist and become famous. And like that's just not how most of this works. Like and the ones that are getting on the playlist have probably done all the hard stuff also.
Mm.
Like, you know?
No, man, I completely agree that it is the way you have to do things. And I think the one thing that stuck out is builds authentic fans. And it's still true. I still say build authentic fans. If you can get 1,000 fans to give you, like super fans is the term used, $100 a year, which isn't a huge amount of money. Like if someone's a super fan, I love the Prodigy. I spent 100 and Chemical Brothers. I spent $100 on them, like more than $100, especially if they're coming in. I'm going to a show. I've already spent that on just going to the show, let alone buying T-shirts and vinyl and all that kind of stuff. That's 100 grand straight away. And like you said, I will. I mean, they're not in the charts anymore, but I'll support those guys until I'm dead. And so yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. Like build up those fans, those super fans, and use the tools that do that. Right. Well, we're bang on an hour. I wanted to quickly ask you what if some the artist that you launched in April when you were an artist, because it came off the back like when someone asks you what you do, it's like, well, what day of the week is it? Because technically at one point you could have said, well, I'm an artist that's number 3 in the charts at the moment or number 4 at the charts. What was the name of the act?
It's called Urban Outlaws. And the song was called Drink and Drink. Drinking without the G. Drinkin.
All right. And Andrew, where do you hang out online? Where can we find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter at Andrew Batey. You can find me. I'm also randomly a crypto DJ, so you could probably find me on Telegram and Discord. So
Yep.
just whatever, just I'm always open if people want to ask me questions or hit me up. I love helping people. So if anyone's listening and wants to reach out, feel free. Like I'm happy to lend a hand.
That'll be awesome. I mean, we didn't even get to touch on any of the crypto NFT stuff. I know we briefly mentioned it. That would be, I think, a whole other hour. So maybe next year I will, we can get you back on and we can, especially if we've got something new for the independent artists. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. It was an absolute honor. Yeah, cheers.
That was rad. I appreciate you having me. Cheers.
Awesome.